As promised, all cozy by the fire with me. It's Marty Biron, our TSN hockey analyst. And Marty, the Jets announced on Wednesday that Kyle Connor will miss 6 to 8 weeks with that lower body injury he suffered after taking that knee-on-knee hit on Sunday night. Just a devastating loss for the Jets. Only double-digit goal score. But, Marty, this team has so much depth. Do you think they could withstand this loss?
Well, I think they can, and it could have been worse for Kyle Connor. Listen, 6 to 8 weeks is the best case scenario. I've seen guys miss remainder of seasons on same knee-to-knee contact. So, but what the Jets can rely upon is they are still a top 10 defensive team when you look at goals against per game. They still have Connor Hellebuck. They still have a lot of depth that can help overcoming the Kyle Connor absence. But the thing with the Jets is, if you take Connor's goals away, they go from a very good positive goal differential to now a negative goal differential. So can just one player really affect your team that much? And right now, if you had to pick the MVP for the Winnipeg Jets, it is Kyle Connor. So, I know it's going to be difficult. In a league where one goal per game is so important, those goals that you now have sitting in the locker room is going to affect the Winnipeg Jets. But I think Rick Bowness and his staff have got to look at different ways to win games, and they do have one of the best goaltenders, and they can lock it down defensively. That is how I would look at overcoming his absence, not just say, hey, let's replace his goals. No, that's not going to work that way.
Marty, I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins. They get the 4-3 shootout win over the Habs on Wednesday. They're only 2 points out of a playoff spot, but as our mutual pal Pierre LeBrun reported in The Athletic, Kyle Dubas is going to take a full evaluation of his team at the All-Star break in early February. Sidney Crosby's only a year away from becoming a UFA. You can't even possibly imagine the idea of Sidney playing in another team. But you think about the future for this team and maybe even the present for this team. How do you see the next few months unfolding for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Marty?
Well, look, they brought back the band together, right? Geno Malkin, Sidney Crosby, Chris Letang. They added Erik Karlsson. They re-signed Tristan Jarry. They're not going to go for it. And now that they're only 2 points away from a playoff spot, and it's Washington Capitals that's sitting in that spot, so I think that you're looking at Washington probably taking a step back. So you want to make sure that, Crosby and the group is going to continue to push forward. And listen, they lost 3-1 to Tampa Bay last week, and they had a players-only meeting. And when you're a GM or a coach and you hear that your players are locking the doors and they're having that type of meeting, and you know that the veterans in that room have been through many players-only meetings, it's not just like nothing's going to come out of it. No, there is going to be a push forward, and it has been led by Sidney Crosby. His effort against the Montreal Canadiens was amazing, right? Even his shootout goal wasn't as pretty as his very first shootout goal against Jose Theodore when he popped the water bottle on the back end. But it's an important step for Sidney Crosby and the team to say, hey, we now had a players-only meeting. We need to respond. They hadn't scored a power play goal in a month. They finally got one against Arizona. They got two against Montreal. Those are steps in the right direction. So I would be, slowing things down if I was Kyle Dubas. You got to give this team a chance and time to get into the playoffs, because once they're in the playoffs, they got the horse to maybe win a round or two.
Marty, I want to have a tough conversation about Jake Markstrom. You're the guy to have that conversation with me as a former goaltender in this league. So he's back at practice after suffering that fractured finger. But with all the uncertainty surrounding the Flames, and I know you've seen Dustin Wolf, and I know you've been as impressed as everybody about Dustin Wolf's play, is it maybe time to start to consider, with 2 years left on his deal after this year, the idea of trading away Jake Markstrom, Marty?
I wouldn't be entertaining the idea just yet, because I think this Flames team wants to take, again, like Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins, steps forward. They're not rebuilding right now. And if you were to go with Dustin Wolf as your number one guy with Dan Vladar, I think you're taking steps backward. Jacob Markstrom, tough start to the season, tough season last year, but he was really starting to get some momentum and play the way that he played 2 years ago. Unfortunately, the injury happened in practice, but you know what? He'll make a full recovery, and then you can see, maybe you give him a month and a half, and you see, okay, is he back to the level that we want him to be at? And if he is, you're probably going to get some calls. But if you don't get what you want in return, he's better in the crease and playing. And maybe you have Dustin Wolf learn from Jacob Markstrom and split some times with him. because you got to make a spot for Wolf now. I know that there's going to be some ups and downs, but you got to make a spot for him. But I would be very careful trading Markstrom when your team wants to make the playoffs and wants to take a step forward. If by the end of January you're not in that position, okay, now you got to entertain it. But I wouldn't do it right now, mid-December.
Let's talk about Blues GM Doug Armstrong. He fires Craig Berube after a loss on Tuesday. And now, as Craig Button said on this show, Marty, on Tuesday, that puts DJ Smith of the Ottawa Senators on the clock. That's no surprise. How much more time do you think owner Michael Andlauer and GM Steve Staios, or team president Steve Staios, can possibly take? How much more time can they take before they have to make a decision here?
Well, I'll tell you this, Jay. Every time I hear Steve Staios talking or even DJ Smith talking, they bring in Jacques Martin, right? And, DJ Smith said, oh, we've been talking about this for about a month. So I think that the communication is great between the coaching staff and the upper management and ownership. So as long as this conversation remains positive, I think DJ Smith is fine. But obviously, the Ottawa Senators have a ton of games in hand, and this will be a telltale sign. If they can get on a 4, 5, 6 games winning streak and make up some of the ground in the Eastern Conference, I think it will be good signs. But if in the next 2 to 3 weeks, all of a sudden the Ottawa Senators stay where they're at or go backwards, now there is going to be even more heat on DJ Smith. And I like DJ, and I think he's a great hockey coach, and I think his staff is a great staff. But if it doesn't work sometimes with the players that you have and the team and the management that you have, you got to go in a different direction. Nothing against a coach. They're all great. There's 32 great coaches in the National Hockey League, but sometimes you got to go in a different direction. About Craig Berube, I was very surprised. It's not one of them that I thought was going to get, the axe right away in the season. And the St. Louis Blues kind of surprised everybody, in my opinion. So now there may be more surprises in the league because that's the first domino to fall.
Marty, can you imagine being Doug Armstrong and actually having to fire Craig Berube? Like, I'd be afraid to just say hi to Craig Berube. Can you imagine having to fire him?
Listen, he is a great guy. He was an assistant coach when I was with the Flyers, right? And I love sitting down and talking to Chief, and he would tell stories about when he played. And so you think you're going for a happy conversation, and then you see the look on Doug Armstrong, you probably have to know what's happening. And you could hear it in his voice, right? In his last press conference after the loss, you could tell that he was almost saying, look, the players got to compete more. And he was the scapegoat, right? You fired a coach so you can send a message to the players. And unfortunately, this is a guy that won the St. Louis Blues a Stanley Cup and had a very successful tenure there. So I felt bad for Chief, but he'll find another job. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yes, I think you're right. I think he'll land on his feet for sure. By the way, the Ottawa Senators begin a 5-game Western road trip in St. Louis, believe it or not, on Thursday. Marty Biron, thanks for joining me by the fire. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Warm and cozy. I love it.